Welcome to this explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to guide you through today's topic. We're looking at a truly fascinating historical puzzle about two incredibly resilient religious movements. It's a story of faith, sheer survival, and deeply intertwined destinies that literally spans centuries. We're talking about grassroots believers who defied powerful kings, vast empires, and heavily armed religious authorities armed with absolutely nothing but their convictions. Let's get right into it.
So here's the mystery. Why do the Waldensians, a historical Italian movement straight out of the rugged, isolated Cottian Alps, sing their hymns in French today? And why on earth do they exclusively use a French symbol instead of a traditional cross? On the surface, that seems completely contradictory, right? I mean, why would deeply rooted Italians adopt the language and symbols of France? It's our central historical mystery for today, and to figure it out, we really have to trace the remarkable journey.
Okay, let's dive into this explainer's roadmap. First, we'll look at Section 1, A Tale of Two Movements, then explore their parallels and differences. After that, we hit a massive historical turning point with the plague's impact, move into a dark era of persecution and exile, and finally wrap up with their survival and emancipation. We are going to trace these groups from their distinct origins to their tragic and permanent convergence.
Let's start with Section 1, A Tale of Two Movements. Because before we can solve the mystery of how they merged, we really need to look at the massive, completely separate origins of both of these groups.
The Waldensians got their start way back in the 12th century as simple mountain peasants, but wow, they were intensely, unbreakably devoted. Think about this. In an era where just owning or reading scripture in your own language could literally mark you for death, these people were memorizing entire sections of the Bible. They traveled across Europe completely undercover, preaching in pairs. They were known as the Barba. Just imagine the sheer danger of that. Ordinary farmers, slipping past authorities, whispering forbidden texts. This ground-level dedication allowed them to explode into a massive movement of 800,000 believers, stretching all the way from France through northern Italy to Germany, long before the Reformation even kicked off.
Now contrast that centuries-long underground buildup with our second group, the French Calvinists, better known as the Huguenots. Their post-Reformation growth was absolutely explosive. Swept up in the intense religious fervor taking over Europe, they leaped from having just 70 churches in France in 1559 to an astonishing 2,000 congregations only 3 years later. Talk about spreading like wildfire. They were this sudden, towering wave, eventually reaching 2 million members and becoming a massive cultural and religious force in French society.
That brings us to Section 2, Parallels and Differences. Now, what's really interesting here is that comparing these two colossal movements gives us the essential context we need for our mystery.
What is truly fascinating is how perfectly their philosophies aligned. Long before the Reformation, the Waldensians had established a firm creedal statement. So when the Reformation actually happened, they found they shared core theological beliefs with the Huguenots. Both groups emphasized the supreme authority of Scripture, they observed just 2 sacraments, and believed in the priesthood of all believers. They even both utilized the exact same French Bible, translated by Robert Olivetan, who, fun fact, was actually John Calvin's cousin. Keep in mind, sharing a vernacular Bible at this time was a profoundly radical act. Theologically, these two movements were practically mirrors of one another.
But despite those shared beliefs, their lived realities were entirely different. The contrast is visceral, really. The Waldensians lived in an alpine economic ghetto, surviving on incredibly harsh subsistence agriculture. They scraped a living out of rocky mountainsides and governed themselves with a connectional Presbyterian-style synod. The Huguenots, on the other hand, were attracting the opulent, wealthy French nobility and the rising urban middle class. They worshipped in well-appointed buildings and structured their churches with a lot of local congregational autonomy. So you've got the exact same theology, but completely polarized demographics. One impoverished and rugged, the other wealthy and aristocratic.
Moving into Section 3, The Plague's Impact. This is the dramatic turning point of this explainer, where historical forces violently and tragically smash these parallel paths together.
Let's walk through the steps of this total disaster in the 1630s. Step 1. The ambitious French King Louis XIII wants to expand his empire, right? So he sends thousands of troops to invade the Cesna Valley. Suddenly, the isolated Waldensians in places like Pinerolo are violently forced to house a massive, demanding, occupying army in their tiny mountain villages. Step 2. With that army came rats, and with those rats came the horrific bubonic plague. Step 3. The outcome was pure devastation. The plague, inadvertently brought by the soldiers, tore through the valleys and killed off more than half of the entire local Waldensian population.
To make matters worse, the tragedy was incredibly concentrated among their leadership. The Waldensians relied heavily on highly educated, seminary-trained ministers who spoke Italian and the local Alpine patois. They were really the glue of the community. Well, out of 16 of these ministers, the plague took 14. Only 2 survived. Think about the profound psychological and spiritual blow of that loss. In a matter of months, they had instantaneously lost almost their entire spiritual guidance, their connection to their Italian roots, and the guardians of their local dialect.
And this brings us to the key that solves our initial linguistic mystery. With their leadership decimated and literally nowhere else to turn, the city of Geneva sent 12 French-speaking Huguenot ministers down to the Alps to guide the surviving Waldensians. Imagine the profound shock to the system for these Italian mountain peasants. Suddenly, their new leaders, their comforters in a time of mass death, were French-speaking foreigners. Because of these new Huguenot leaders, the entire Waldensian worship service and all of their sermons shifted entirely to French in 1630. And astoundingly, they continued preaching in French all the way into the 1920s.
But the cultural merger didn't stop at language. Take a look at the distinct design of the Huguenot cross. Historically, Waldensians flatly rejected Roman Catholic symbols in their sanctuaries. They viewed them as ostentatious distractions from the raw truth of the gospel. But under their new Huguenot leaders, they fully embraced this specific symbol. It's a striking historical irony, isn't it? A group so averse to religious decoration adopted this cross so fervently that it became the only piece of jewelry Waldensian women were allowed to wear for hundreds of years, aside from a wedding band. The two movements were now deeply, permanently intertwined.
This brings us to Section 4, Persecution and Exile. Having merged culturally to survive the devastation of the plague, they would soon need each other just to survive the darkest chapter of their history.
33 campaigns of persecution. Over the course of 700 years, historical records show that the Roman Catholic Church, the French kings, and the Dukes of Savoy worked, sometimes right in concert with one another, waging 33 separate campaigns of destruction, torture, and death to entirely eradicate the Waldensians. We aren't just talking about political pressure here, we are talking about centuries of sheer terror. Entire generations of families were born into a world where absolute annihilation by massive imperial armies was a constant, looming threat.
Let's trace this timeline of violence. In 1572, the St. Bartholomew Day Massacre triggered waves of deadly violence against French Huguenots. Fast forward to 1685, and King Louis XIV completely revokes all religious tolerance, launching a massive extermination campaign. By 1687, the remaining 3,000 Waldensians were violently driven from their ancestral mountain homes and exiled to Geneva. But they did not surrender. In 1689, a leader named Henri Arnaud, alongside many Huguenots, launched a legendary counter-assault known as the Glorious Return. They literally fought their way through treacherous mountain passes in the dead of winter to successfully reclaim the Caudian Alps. Their endurance, their absolute refusal to be erased is just awe-inspiring.
Finally, let's conclude our historical journey with Section 5, Survival and Emancipation. We'll explore how this incredible bond, forged through plague and persecution, finally saw the light of freedom.
February 17, 1848, the Edict of Emancipation. On this monumental day, King Carlos Alberto, the Duke of Savoy, officially granted the Waldensians freedom of religion. I mean, just imagine the profound relief that must have washed over those valleys. This single edict finally ended nearly 7 centuries of intense, suffocating political, religious, and economic oppression. After hundreds of years of hiding in the shadows and physically fighting for the right to exist, they could finally just breathe.
So what did they do with this newfound freedom? Well, they didn't isolate themselves or hold on to bitterness. Instead, they immediately began expanding and evangelizing the surrounding Italian regions, eventually establishing their first new congregation outside the valleys in Turin. To reach these new populations, their sermons finally shifted back from French to the local Italian language. But they never forgot the people who saved them when they were at their absolute lowest point. To this day, in a beautiful, living homage to the Huguenots, the Waldensians continue to sing their hymns in French. Mystery solved. This entire journey perfectly embodies the ancient Waldensian motto, Lux lucit in tenebris, which translates to, the light shines in the darkness. Their fierce, unwavering dedication to Scripture acted as a literal and spiritual light, guiding them through centuries of the most immense, dark persecution you could possibly imagine. I want to leave you with this provocative thought from the great Reformation leader Martin Luther. He famously said, "We were all Waldensians without knowing it." It really makes you wonder just how much profound, unseen influence these resilient,
faithful mountain people have had on the entire course of human history. So, what do you think? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you found this historical puzzle as captivating as I did. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.